When analyzing visual texts, we want to use the OPTIC strategy, which is just an acronym, and you can use it for any kind of visual text, whether it's a painting or a photograph, street art, or a political cartoon, anything like that. And so what OPTIC stands for is overview, parts, title or text, interrelationships, and conclusion. So for the overview, all you're going to do is in one statement, one sentence, one phrase, what is the image about? So if it's a political cartoon, you would say it's a political cartoon criticizing America or criticizing the president or something like that. For parts, you're going to answer what are the different elements, right? What are the different parts that are there? So colors, shapes, patterns, textures, figures, any kind of symbols, anything like that. And you're just going to list them. You're just going to say, this is there, this is there, this is there, this is there. Super simple, level 1 type question. Title and text is how is the text contributing to the message or the meaning? And so for title, if it has a title, or text if it has text, political cartoons, things like that will have text in the actual image, but many of the images that you might be analyzing won't, and so you'll really want to know, what is the title? Does the title add anything, or is it simply just a descriptor of what's going on in the image? I is for interrelationships. So how do the parts relate to one another, right? So we talked about the parts up here. How do these parts relate? So here you just listed them all, and then here you're going to actually tell me, hey, where are they in relation to other parts, right? Where are the parts positioned in the image and in relationship to those other parts? And we'll talk about it in an example in just a second. And then C is conclusion. What's the message or meaning of the image as a whole? This is going to be theme or claim. It can be super short and just say, bam, here you go. Or you could be, if I'm asking for a more elaborate conclusion, you could do an entire paragraph kind of explaining how all of these pieces up here kind of create this message or meaning at the very end. So let's look at a very specific example. Here is Mobile Lovers by Banksy. And if you know who Banksy is, he's basically a street artist who has become pretty famous for making very political statements. And so in 2014, he did this image in his hometown. And so I'm not going to give you too much historical context. If you want to look it up, you can. But here, right, just take that image in for a second, right? So if we were to go through the OPTIC piece, right, we would, for overview, which is O, right, we would just say, what is this image about, right? What in general is it about? So for me, I said a mural on a door-sized piece of plywood containing two lovers staring at their phones while in an embrace. It's super short, it's pretty generic, right? So we've got in this kind of doorway here, we've got plywood, and you can tell it's plywood because of the texture, right? And we know it's street art, right? There's clearly images, stones on the side here, okay? And then I just described kind of what is it, right? Two lovers in an embrace with their phones. P, parts, right? There's a man and a woman. They're looking at their phones. Colors are black and white. The man and the woman are wearing suits. There's a black background. All of these things are just details from here, right? I could also say that it's spray painted, right? I could say that the plywood texture underneath comes through. I could talk about the fact that the bottom of the image is actually a stone piece down here that the plywood is attached to, okay? And so that's just kind of, that's what the parts are. I'm just describing what's actually in the image. The more specific, the better. For T, I've got Mobile Lovers is the only text because it is the title. And so here, this is something where we have to kind of critically think about, okay, what does mobile lovers really mean, right? And so here I've got mobile lovers is a play on words. Usually, an image like this would be called lovers, right? When two people are just being in this warm embrace, right, they would just be called lovers. But the addition of the phones makes it a commentary on how using technology is kind of become a norm now instead of the face-to-face communication, right? So here, okay, mobile lovers, if I had removed mobile here and just said lovers, right, and removed these guys, there would be no social commentary. It would just be an image of these beautiful people embracing. But because he added mobile here, and we have the addition of the phones on either end, right, that really just impactfully says, it's making a commentary on technology and the use of technology, even in the midst of this really intimate moment. So that's kind of what I would put for the T part, because that's the only text that there is. I, interrelationships. The embracing couple is directly centered and life-sized. So I talked about the couple before, right? But now I'm talking about them in relation to everything else. So here, they are perfectly centered. Sorry about that. They're perfectly centered through in this doorway area. And they're life-sized. If you were to walk by this, they would be about the same size as normal people. The woman's on the right, the man's on the left, right? I'm just talking about their relationship to one another here. The brightest parts are their phones and their faces. I talked about the fact that, hey, this part is illuminated, as is this part. And that might say something. It might be that he's trying to emphasize the technology piece as opposed to emphasizing maybe their actual embrace here, right? The fact that it's super dark, everything else, it's a black background. I could have added that. And so I'm just taking it and saying, hey, what are the parts doing in relation to one another? Where are they actually physically positioned in the piece itself? And then C is my conclusion. So Banksy is making a social statement that people in relationships don't actually spend quality time anymore, but are consumed by their phones. I could have rephrased that to say they're consumed by technology or something like that, right? It's written as a theme because that's what conclusion is, right? What conclusion can we come up with based on everything else that we've kind of evaluated? So if you notice, we've got the O, overview, is level 1, right? The parts is, again, going to be level 1 questioning. T is moving into that level 2 bit, right? Where we're saying, hey, what's the interpretation? Why is this called mobile lovers instead of just lovers, right? Interrelationships, again, is actually level 1, right? We could add some level 2 here and interpret the interrelationships, right? We could say that because they're directly centered, right? Banksy wanted to make sure that they were the center of attention, right? The fact that the brightest parts are their phones and their faces as opposed to maybe their actual embrace. Maybe he wants us to focus more on the technology piece, right? Maybe it's emphasizing his message. We could say that kind of stuff. That would all be level 2. But right now, all I've put is level 1 stuff here. And then when we get to C, right, this is going to be our level 3. It's a universal statement. People in relationships don't actually spend quality time anymore, but are consumed by their phones. This is a very level 3. It applies, it's universal. It's a universal statement that applies to people today. And so that's basically how you would use the OPTIC strategy for this. So don't overthink it, right? It's literally just a strategy to help you figure out what is the artist trying to communicate to their audience.